Can the Chargers put the nail in the Chiefs' coffin? Is the Chiefs season going to be over? We're going to talk about that all on today's crossover episode of Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Chargers next.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Chargers. This is your crossover episode for a huge AFC West showdown. This is your daily podcast covering the Kansas City Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Now the number one sports podcast network in the U.S. We really do appreciate that. Thank you for always making Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Chargers your first listen of the day. Go check out one of the other shows. As I said, go check out maybe the Chargers show. A lot of great information getting you ready for this game. I'm Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. This is Daniel Wade talking about this Chargers-Chiefs matchup, and it's kind of weird. I'll say this up front. It's kind of weird. It's a noon kickoff. Kansas City hasn't had many of those, and the Chargers aren't used to playing that early, so I wonder how that's going to play into it. But we're going to talk about keys to win a little bit later. We're going to talk about Roman versus Spags, the offense versus the defense, and can the Chiefs' offensive line survive against this Chargers' defensive line? That's going to be a big storyline in this game. But we're going to start with talking about whether or not the Chargers can finish off Kansas City or if Kansas City is going to survive. But before we get there, I do want to say today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Daniel, there is so much to talk about when we start getting into this game. And the biggest storyline right now, at least in my opinion, is you look back and this season started with Kansas City falling to the Chargers in Brazil. And the Chargers have every chance that they could possibly want to basically make it in for Kansas City this week.
This is weird, Chris. We've done this show many times. I haven't been sitting in it in December many times looking with the Chargers looking down on the Chiefs in the AFC West. So this is a pretty foreign feeling. But yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, what the biggest thing is for each of these teams. It's one team basically trying to clinch their own playoff spot with the win over the Chiefs and what that will do for them tiebreaker-wise and also just as far as their conference record goes. But more than that, you're in December, and not only do you have a chance to, overtake the Chiefs in the AFC West or, have a meaningful game, you have a chance to end it. If the Chargers beat the Chiefs can't catch them, right? You're mathematically eliminated from catching the Chargers. They can't get to 10 wins if you beat them now. The other part of it is, if you don't beat them and then they run the table, that's on you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I still think that the Chiefs will be the favorites once they play the Broncos again. Chiefs are favorites in this one, 4.5 points last time I checked, and for good reason. It is great for the Chargers to have this opportunity. I don't think it's a house money game or anything like that, but you get this chance. You've taken them out once, and now in December, you have a chance to borderline end their playoff hopes. That's what it is. The AFC is so crowded. If the Chiefs lose this one, I mean, they might need help even if they do win out. If they lose this one, that's a huge blow, and if you're the Chargers, you shouldn't need more motivation than that to get up for this game.
And if you look at it from Kansas City's perspective, you were playing for your playoff lives right now. And quite frankly, I mean, this game is going to be like a Super Bowl matchup for Kansas City to an extent, just because every game left is live or die. If you don't win, you are going to be done. And at this point, you have to win out to even have a chance. And even a chance doesn't get you there, because the Chargers have to lose a couple more games on top of this one in order for Kansas City to really even have a chance. So lots of different things to go into on that. But when you look at this for Kansas City, it's a matter of it's do or die. And I will say I will never really bet against Patrick Mahomes. I just don't think that's a smart thing to do based on his history. But the way that this team has been playing, you can't put it all on Patrick Mahomes' shoulders. And this team has tried to put it all on Patrick Mahomes' shoulders way too many times this season, and not helping with the supporting staff. Travis Kelce having some big drops last week. Noah Gray having a couple of big drops last week. Rashee Rice having a huge drop last week. All of that played into a situation where they should have beat Houston, or at least been in a position to go down and win at the end, and they couldn't because a lot of their playmakers just couldn't do anything right and get the ball or catch the ball when they needed to.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? Because this is something that obviously Justin Herbert has had to deal with way too much in his career, where it's just that, like, the whole offense is what is Justin Herbert going to do, and how far can he carry us with his right arm? Are we going to protect him? No, not really, right? Are we going to give him a great running game? No, we're not going to do that either. Let's see how far he can take us. And, to his credit, he's been able to, I think, overachieve with a lot of the rosters that the Chargers have had. Now, the shoe is on the other foot a little bit, but then you look over and see the Chargers who, both all-pro kind of level tackles are sitting on in season-ending injured reserve, and they're going to have their own tough parts of it. But I'm glad you brought up the 10 a.m. start, at least 10 a.m. Pacific time start for Chargers fans out on the West Coast, because that is something that has gotten them so far this year. It's not as long of a trip, but look at the games they lost. I mean, they lost against the Giants, and that game East Coast time, 10-8 or 1 o'clock start East Coast time, 10 o'clock local start for the Chargers. And they play terribly. You look at the Jaguars game where they got beat 35-6. I could have told you 10 minutes into that game that the Chargers were going to lose, because it just felt like they never got off the plane. And then you combine that with them struggling to a certain extent against the Dolphins when they were at their lowest, struggling a little bit at the beginning of the game against the Titans. So I don't think that plays into the Chargers' favor. It does feel like a very prototypical CBS 1:25 Pacific time start kind of game. It's a little weird to me that this one is at 10 a.m., but I definitely don't think that plays in the Chargers' favor. And like I said, there's nothing more dangerous than cornering a wounded animal, right? Like, the Chargers are still going to have to play their A game. And I think last week, maybe one of the more impressive things about it is, they didn't have their A game on Monday Night Football against the Eagles, and they still found a way to kind of grit it out and win by 3 points in a miraculous kind of overtime game. But the reason this is so important for the Chargers is, if you lose this, you're not out of the playoffs, right? But they might be the underdog in every game they have for the rest of the season. They're an underdog this week to the Chiefs, and they also have the Cowboys, the Texans, and the Broncos still left on their schedule. So there's no game that is a given for this Chargers team, and they absolutely, if they don't play well, can lose out, right? And give someone like the Chiefs a chance in a crowded AFC. So as much as this is about finishing the Chiefs, it's also about securing your own playoff spot, because there's no easy win left on their schedule.
Well, and I would also argue that it's, at least looking at it from the Chargers' perspective, if you can't put Kansas City away in this scenario, how do you feel like you're going to be producing when you get to the playoffs, if you make the playoffs?
100%.
That's my big thing. If I was talking about the Chargers, that would be my big thing. If they can't finish off a wounded duck Kansas City team that has just killed themselves multiple times this season, how are you going to do things when teams are actually playing better in the playoffs? So I'm going to be very curious to see how this game shakes out. And I am going to get a little curious that it's a noon start. Kansas City hasn't had that many of those this season. And to have a Chargers game this late in the year and still be at a noon start was kind of surprising to me. So I will be interested to see how that plays into things. When we get back, we're going to talk about Roman versus Spags, talking offense versus defense, and talking about Kansas City's injured offensive line and whether or not they can survive against this Chargers defensive line. That's coming up next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports. Bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right calls is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on the daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. PrizePicks has added an additional layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats: fantasy score, field goals attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Roman versus Spags and the Chiefs offensive line versus this Chargers defensive line. So much to talk about when we start looking at the matchups in this game. I will let you go ahead and start. Daniel, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think when you think about the biggest matchups in this game, there are a lot of one-on-one matchups you could go with, but I think for the Chargers, the overarching thing here is just their offensive coordinator, who's coming off one of the worst game plans and worst offensive performances of the season, going up against someone who's as seasoned as and experienced as Steve Spagnuolo. Because one thing that was actually pretty surprising is how off guard he caught Spags in week 1, right? With the play action, Spags said as much afterwards, hey, we thought they were going to pound the rock. They ended up going a bunch of play action, and then they got us early. And as that game kind of evened out a little bit, they were much more blow for blow than the beginning, where the Chargers definitely kind of had them on the wrong foot. And I think that you can't get them again with that, right? Like, that's the thing, is that you surprise us once, that's fine. You're not going to be able to get away with the same things this week if you're Greg Roman. So you have to have a different kind of, you have to have a different game plan than you did when these two teams matched up in Brazil. Now, he has, more going from him from the standpoint of now, at least at this point of the season, you're getting Omarion Hampton back, which is nice. But the offensive line is always going to bring the limitations of what it's going to be with no Rashawn Slater and no Joe Alt. And we saw it last week. I mean, the Chargers gave up about 70% pressures on Justin Herbert's dropbacks. Like, that's an insane number. Like, it's an unsustainable number. Patrick Mahomes didn't even face that when he was missing his 3 top linemen last week. It's just a disgusting number you can't win with. But if you're Greg Roman, you know this, right? You have to know the limitations of what you have going offensively. And I think that is going to be a huge thing in this game, is what does he have for Steve Spagnuolo? Because I saw him give up 5 free rushers in the A-gap last week. If you're not more prepared this week, you're not going to win. You're not going to win this game with 1 offensive touchdown. Like, it's just not going to happen. So to me, Greg Roman versus Steve Spagnuolo is definitely the biggest matchup.
I laughed when you talked about the pressure rate Justin Herbert was under, because I'm sitting here thinking he just also had surgery on his off hand, and has a broken hand. So, good luck with that. That's not fun to deal with. And 70% rusher, 70% pressure rate is not something you ever want to have your star quarterback being.
I've never even seen that number before in that context. Right. I've never seen it get up to 70. That is crazy.
Well, Kansas City's dealt with 50 some percent multiple times. Yeah. And the crazy thing, and we'll talk about the Chiefs offensive line here in just a moment, but the crazy thing is last week, you look at last week's game and your starting left tackle's out. Josh Simmons is out for the year at this point. I think it's probably the year at this point. I don't think he'll come back from his broken wrist at this late stage, unless it's late in the playoffs, but that's a very far down thing that we will talk about.
Got to get there
now.
First.
Right. But then Wanye Morris, the first snap of the game for the Chiefs offense, goes out and hurts his knee and is out for the rest of the game. So you have Issa Pole step in and be a starter at left tackle basically the entire rest of the game against what I feel is probably easily a top 3 defensive line, if not the top defensive line in the NFL. And while he didn't pitch a shutout, I think he only allowed 2 pressures on the day. And considering what he was going up against, that's pretty impressive from a rookie.
Yeah, of course. Of course the Chiefs can pull their 3rd string left tackle and have him give up only 2 pressures against the Houston Texans defense. And the thing is when you're judging the Houston Texans defense, it's not just about how talented the defensive line is, because that is a very talented unit. It's also about the elite guys they have behind that defensive line, which means you're going to have to hold on to that ball a little longer than you want to, because the coverage from guys like Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie and Caleb Bullock on the back end is so ridiculous, right? I mean, Kamari Lassiter. That's the hard thing about this Chargers team is obviously I watched the game Sunday Night Football last week. I watched it again this week just to think about what the Chargers can kind of do this week. And it's hard because it's like, well, the Chargers don't have Will Anderson, right? Or like, it's just hard because that Texans defense is so good. It's hard to really kind of have big takeaways from that Chiefs offense, who blew multiple opportunities, like you said. But on the other side of that, though, the Chargers have to be able to take advantage of the KC offensive line. And we were talking a little bit before the show. You do think they might get a little bit healthier this week?
Yeah, I do. I think that it's possible that they're going to get Trey Smith back, and if they get him back, I think that could be a huge boon to the middle of the offensive line. The one thing that I think is interesting is, while he isn't technically a rookie, Kingsley Suamataia has stepped into a starting role, taking over for Joe Thuney, and massive shoes to fill. And I'm not saying he's filled them, but he has played very well, and he's gotten better each quarter of the season. So if you can get to a point where you have Kingsley and Creed and Trey Smith is back, then you feel really good about, your interior of your offensive line. And then it's a question of how do you help the tackles? I don't know that Juwan Taylor is going to practice. He was limited on Wednesday, so it's possible he would end up playing, but I still wonder if he'll be able to go. And the other big question when you start talking about that and how this is going to play out is Isapole going to continue to be your left tackle if Juwan Taylor comes back? Or are you going to put in Jalen Moore, who you signed in the offseason, even though Isapole just had an amazing game against the Houston Texans with no real practice and no real prep?
Yeah, I mean, that's like, again, not nice problems to have. The Chargers, it was kind of the opposite because the last game, they were as healthy as they've been post Joe Alt injury, right? Which kind of just changed everything for their season. But like Bobby Hart comes in and allows 8 pressures. That's what it's supposed to look like, Chiefs fans. When your third string offensive tackle comes into the game, you're supposed to allow 8 pressures. I think Jalen Moore actually allowed 8 pressures last week, which not great. Something the Chargers have to take advantage of. But I think the thing is, the Chargers had 2 dudes who gave up 8 or more pressures last week between Bobby Hart and Mekhi Becton. That right side was a sieve. But I do think when you're talking about the Chargers, the one biggest thing they have to get going for themselves is their own pass rush, right? This is a pass rush unit that only had 1 sack in the Monday Night Football game against the Eagles. But go back and look at every Jalen Hurts interception that you saw, right? You're going to see a Khalil Mack or a Tuli Tuipulotu right in his face, or even an defy who might have had, one of his best games as a Charger so far. They have 3 guys now, which is different than what they've had in the past. And I think it's given a little bit more balance to that group because they have a little bit more of a variety of skill sets that they can try to attack you with. But it is a non-negotiable for this Chargers defense. Like, there's a reason the Chargers have turned the ball over defensively 10 times in the last 4 games. It's because the pass rush has been getting there, right? And the pass rush is affecting things. It's a little different with Patrick Mahomes. One of the best things they did last week was Jalen Hurts didn't have a big rushing game, because that is the thing, right? You want to get pressure, you want to be able to collapse the pocket, but if you get too wide, you open up these spaces, Patrick Mahomes, usually Jalen Hurts, are going to kill you. So it's not even about the Chargers necessarily getting 5 sacks in this game, even though that would be great, right? I just think they have to have a very consistent amount of pressure throughout this thing, because it's hard enough when you let Patrick Mahomes have time, but it's even harder when your guys aren't getting home on 3rd and longs, and then he's just going to pick you apart.
Well, and I think the interesting thing that I'm going to be very curious to see if the Chargers try to replicate and the rest of the teams that play Kansas City tries to replicate is, generally speaking, Kansas City's been seeing a lot of fronts where they will bring up a linebacker, even if it's a 4-3 defense, and they will have 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, making you think that every single player is going to be by themselves one-on-one. Yeah. And that is a big question when you start looking at how this is going to play. If you get Trey Smith back, I don't think you worry about it near as much, because then you have, you feel pretty good about the interior being able to take care of, the A gaps and not having somebody just get right in Mahomes' face. But the big thing is like, can he step up in the pocket? Because if he can't step up in the pocket and the tackles are getting beat around the end, he's going to get sacked anyway. So yeah. I agree with you. I do think that this is a huge matchup when you start looking at how this is going to play out for both of these teams. If Kansas City is able to get, Juwan Taylor back, and I don't know what they're going to do at left tackle. I'm going to be very curious to see what they do at left tackle if Juwan Taylor plays. If he doesn't, that's another question, because do they leave Jalen Moore at right tackle and play Isapole again at left tackle, knowing that you can practice them this week wherever you feel like they should be playing?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think it's going to be one of the biggest things that decides this game. And, obviously Jalen Moore allowed 8 pressures last game. So like, if you want that guy in the lineup, if you're the Chargers, then potentially getting Juwan Taylor that back, then potentially getting Trey Smith back is not a good thing. And I think that when you're the Chargers defensively, the corners that they have, they looked great. It's because of the pressure. Those guys will still get picked apart if you give Patrick Mahomes time. And like, if you look even back to, kind of some of the most famous losses of this Chiefs dynasty, a lot of it's coming with Patrick Mahomes running for his life. So if you can create that kind of chaos, I think you're going to give yourself a chance. If you're going to let them dink and dunk and then be able to kind of pick you apart because you can't get that pressure, it's going to be a long night.
Yeah, and it could be a long night for both teams.
Or a long morning, I guess, because we're playing so early in the day now.
Morning for you. It could be a long afternoon, I guess. We'll put it that way for the Chiefs Kingdom. But it could be a long game for both of these teams because there's so much on the line for both of them. But we're going to talk about the keys to win for both these teams right after this. Car shopping should feel exciting, not confusing. And with Car Gurus, you get the confidence you deserve. They go through all the noise so you can actually see the best deals on the cars you want. Because when it comes to a big purchase, you deserve the best deal. And Car Gurus makes that whole process simple by giving you real information, real ratings, and more listings than anyone else so you can shop the way you want to. Use Car Gurus deal ratings to compare cars quickly without having to guess whether the price is fair. You'll love being able to filter by everything: mileage, trim, features, so you're only seeing the cars that actually fit what you need. Their price drop alerts are a lifesaver. You get notified the second a car you're watching becomes a better deal. The in-depth vehicle reviews help you understand what ownership actually looks like, not just how the car looks online. Car Gurus connects you with trusted dealerships for a transparent and hassle-free buying process. With over 4 million listings, the most of any major online automotive marketplace, you'll always find the best deal. Shop the way you want with the tools, data, and unbiased deal ratings that make it easy. Buy or sell your next car today at cargurus.com. That's CARGURUS.com. Cargurus.com. Guys, it's 2025, almost 2026. And those days of waiting for something to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor, they're over. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that weird shoulder stiffness is just sleeping wrong. It's time to take your health seriously. And ZocDoc makes that easier than ever. Because staying healthy is more than hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting things checked out when something feels off. Using ZocDoc makes scheduling easier. Search for in-network doctors and book right in the app. Real appointment times are listed, including same-day visits. No more back-and-forth phone calls or waiting weeks to be seen. Super helpful for routine checkups and those little issues you've been meaning to get checked out. Let you compare providers using real patient reviews, not ads. It makes it simple to keep your health a priority, even with a busy schedule. So stop putting off your doctor's appointments and get the care you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Keys to a win. I'm going to let you kick this off, but I do want to say something you brought up last segment that I didn't get a touch on, that I really agreed with. When you look at what Roman did to Spags last game, they completely thought they were going to do one thing and did something else. I think Kansas City expected them to run the ball, and then they came out passing, and it threw them off the entire game. But what do you see as your keys to victory?
Yeah, and that was, one of the good instances of Greg Roman this year. And obviously there's been a lot more that weren't so good. But I think that, part of that is just you can't get away with it again, right? And I think especially with the limitations of Justin Herbert and his broken left hand and how often they're willing to go under center and actually sell that play action, is going to be important as well. Because out of play action in shotgun, they're not nearly as good as their play action when they're under center. But I think for me, this is the number one thing, especially kind of going back to a theme that we've had here, which is the 10 a.m. Pacific time start for the Chargers, which is just bring an unrelenting effort and do it right away. That's the number one key, and you would think that would be a given, especially for a big-time matchup. But look at the games the Chargers have lost this year where they just haven't shown up, right? The Jaguars game, you lose 35-6. Right? You got to talk about the Commanders game. You lose 27-10. You go play the Colts. They beat the brakes off you. The Chargers didn't have the requisite effort in those games. They got blown off the line of scrimmage. They lost in the trenches, and they just never really had a chance. And I think when you look back at that Cowboys game against the Chiefs and you look at, what those players are saying afterwards, where it was like, in practice this week, we just knew that every single guy has to be just full balls out to the wall, trying to go after Mahomes at all time, and you just can't ever give him a second to breathe. You can't ever give him that extra 6 inches to feel comfortable enough to get a throw off, right? And I think that's so important against someone like Patrick Mahomes, who the play's just never dead, right, when you're there. And the big thing for the Chargers is, in 3 of their 4 losses, they've gotten blown out. Like 3 of their 4 losses have been by 14 or more points. So it might be the thing where it's like the Chiefs have been really, really bad in one-score games, but the Chargers have also not kept their losses to being one-score games. And if you can not put the Chiefs in those situations where every play matters and a drop from Rashee Rice kills you or a tip ball by Travis Kelce kills you, if they're up by 17, that doesn't matter, right? If they're up by 17, Rashee Rice can drop a ball on 4th down. So I think that unrelenting effort has to come. And I think it also, number 2, is about winning the turnover battle. The Chargers have only not turned the ball over in 2 games this season. It's insane. The last year, they had 9 games where they turned the ball over. They've already matched it this year and surpassed it. They have a turnover problem. Justin Herbert specifically is, most interceptions he's had in several seasons, and they've all been costly, right? In these big games, if you're trying to kill the king, if you're trying to knock the top off of this AFC West, you can't have it, right? You just can't have it, and you also have to be willing to turn them over as well. And then the last thing, Chris, just straight up, the offense just has to be better. The offense that played last week is unsustainable. A 70% pressure rate is unsustainable. You're not going to beat teams like that. You're definitely not going to beat good teams like that. The Eagles were dysfunctional, right? We knew that going into that game. You got away with it. You will lose the last 4 games if you're only scoring 1 offensive touchdown each of them.
Yeah.
So as much as it seems like that's such a simple thing, the offense has to be much better. It's by no means a given with the injuries that they have and the inconsistencies that they've shown. So to me, it's bring that unrelenting effort, win the turnover battle because you won it 5-2 last week, and it was a big reason why you won. And the offense just has to show up.
It's funny. I have said this just about every single Chiefs game this season, and it is more important in this game probably than any others because Kansas City is not a good team this year. Their record shows that they're not a good team this year. They're not even 500 right now, and
Crazy.
I never could have begun to think that would be the case in December when you started the season. Looking at their offense, looking at the offensive roster, I just never thought that they would be in a situation where they just couldn't get things done. You talk about Rashee Rice having a drop. You talk about Travis Kelce having a drop. Those are supposed to be 2 of your biggest playmakers, and they have just absolutely killed this team week in and week out at different times. And that's a big thing. And I will say, I think the first key to victory for Kansas City, play a clean game. And what I mean by that is your playmakers make plays. They actually catch the ball as opposed to drop it or pop it up to where it's intercepted. That's number one. If you can do that, that goes a long way to just even having a chance to win. Number 2, I agree with what you said. Win the turnover battle. Kansas City has been turning the ball over like crazy, but they can't get a turnover to save their lives. So you may be in luck in that regard, Daniel, because Kansas City can't seem to get turnovers, but they are caught, but they're giving the ball up. And it's not really, the funny thing is I think they've had maybe 1 fumble that they've lost this year. It's all been interceptions.
Yeah.
And and I won't say most, but some of the interceptions have been tip balls. Like the one to Travis Kelce last week, that's an interception, but that's not on Mahomes.
Right.
It was maybe a little behind. You could argue that. Same with the one against the Eagles, like we talked about early before the show started. Like maybe a little bit behind, but you have to catch those balls, and you can't put it up in the air if you don't. So that's a huge one. And do what the Eagles did. I know the Eagles lost, but if you get pressure on Justin Herbert, it goes a long way to slowing that offense down. If you get pressure on Justin Herbert and you hit him a couple of times and he's going down and having to pick himself up on that broken hand, that's not going to help the situation. I'm not asking for an injury. I want to be clear on that. I'm just saying you need to hit him. You need to get pressure. A couple sacks would be nice, but the Chiefs haven't been doing that this year. And so for me, it's a matter of, can you play a clean game? And that also kind of relates to penalties as well, because they've been kicking themselves in the foot, or they've been, shooting themselves in the foot with penalties all season long. You got to win the turnover battle, and you have to get pressure on Justin Herbert and make him pay when he tries to throw the ball. Because I do think when you look at this matchup and you look at this game, what I would do, at least from the Chargers' perspective, is I would try to run the ball, because 1, it takes it out of Justin Herbert's hands and hopefully doesn't get him hit very much. Yeah. And 2, that's what they're built to do. Now, granted, this offensive line, not so much, but we'll see how that plays out on Sunday.
They're much better run blockers than they are pass protectors. I think we can all feel pretty safe saying that. And yeah, it is. Running the ball for this team, they want it to be their identity, but it's just been too inconsistent, at least as far as their running backs go, because the game plan last week wasn't, okay, let's have Justin Herbert with his broken left hand be the leading rusher and scramble 10 times and take a bunch of big hits. And guys are targeting it, right? I can name 3 players on the Eagles that specifically went out and targeted that left hand. That is just a part of being in the NFL. And if you're the Chiefs, you don't even have to do that, right? You just want him falling down and thinking about it, right? Because there's times you see him and he's just, he's messing with the hand. He's kind of, feeling a little bit. Honestly, I think when he stormed off from that reporter, I think he thought he had hurt it more. I think he thought he had re-injured it in that situation.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about. When you hit him, The problem with having that type of injury is you get hit and you're thinking, I need to brace myself as I'm falling in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not trying to say I want to see him injured, but that's not a great situation for a quarterback
No.
to be in, because when you're going to the ground, you're going to try to brace yourself. And if you put too much pressure on that, you're going to probably break it again.
Well, not only that, Chris, it's just like it was a little bit better this week, but when he first broke his hand against the Raiders, like the one thing you could see was like he's only in the pistol, he's only in the shotgun, and like he's having to figure out how to hand the ball off again, because usually,
Yep.
you're running to the right, you're handing that thing off with your left hand when you turn around, right? So it's like everything's like a little bit clunkier, right? Taking a split second longer. And more than that, the ball security was a major issue in the last game. The first game against the Raiders, he was bobbling it, but he was able to keep it for the most part. He put the ball on the ground twice, which is very unlike him. And the thing is when he's getting hit, he's thinking, oh, I don't want him to hit my left hand, but I also need my left hand to cover up this football and make sure it doesn't get stripped. Better later on in the game, to the point where he actually stiff-armed a dude with his broken left hand, which is probably not under the doctor's advice, right? But unfortunately, that's kind of what it feels like this team has to be. And we've seen Patrick Mahomes do it so many times, right? Where the passing game isn't totally there. They don't have a running game that he can lean on. And in those moments, he always finds a way. He picks up the first down with his legs. He gets that third down conversion. That's the only reason the Chargers won last week, but it's also a really hard thing to live and die on when you don't have a fully healthy quarterback. Like, they need Omarion Hampton and Kamani Vidal to be the leading rushers on this team, right? They shouldn't be second and third and Justin Herbert being first. Now, he's going to have to do what he has to do, and there's probably, look at the game one. He iced it with a 3rd and 15 conversion with his legs. He's going to have to do it, but man, like every time you do it, it's a roll of the dice.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I think that's going to be a huge storyline going into this game. And it's a question of, can Kansas City contain him, and can they make him, if they take away the things in the back end where he feels like he has to run, does he put himself in a precarious position where he doesn't want to be, and he does something that he shouldn't do? Again, not saying I want to see him injured. I don't, because I think Justin Herbert's one of the best QBs in the NFL. I want to see that. I don't like seeing player injuries, so I want to be clear on that.
Sure.
But it's one of those things. It's like you're playing in the NFL. It's part of playing is you get injuries and you do something that's going to re-aggravate. Kansas City's done that. Had multiple players do that this season. So something to definitely watch there. That's going to be it for us today. Be sure to check out the Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Chargers podcasts for the game previews. We will get you covered for this game, give you our previews, give you who we think is going to win, score predictions, and much, much more on those shows. Daniel, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. And I would love to say good luck. I wouldn't mean it, though.
Hey, I appreciate you being genuine about it. Oh, I want him to take the king out. I want him to take him to the town square. Let the entire village see it. Now, do I think that they're going to? I don't know about that, but what I will say is it's great for the Chargers to be at this point, to be the ones with the axe in their hand, ready to Ned Stark the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday, potentially. So I'm really excited. I think it'll be a good battle, and the Chargers have a chance to do something really special, and I think they're going to have to take the Chiefs' best punch to do it.
Yep, I agree with that completely. That is going to be it for us today. Thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate it, and we will talk to you tomorrow.